Hi everyone, Mr. Trauber here. Just wanted to take time to record some answers to some commonly asked Adobe Animate questions that have been popping up in class. The first one is how to add sound to a particular keyframe, and how to apply a fade out or any other kind of effect to that sound. You'll see down here that I have my layer labeled sound and that this is a blank keyframe because it's not filled in all the way to frame 50. If I want a sound to start at frame 50, I've got to make sure I've got that particular frame selected, and then I've got to add a blank keyframe to it, like so. And then I've already got my sound imported into the library, which if your library doesn't pop up automatically, don't forget it's this little stack of books over here. And then I can drag the sound to the stage, like so. You'll notice that there's a little line here, and if I add more frames there, you'll see that the sound plays as long as I have frames added. If you drop a sound like here at frame 28, it's going to start playing it where the keyframe started. It will not start playing it at frame 28 unless you make frame 28 a blank keyframe, like so. Otherwise, it will start playing at the nearest blank keyframe. If I need this sound to fade out, what I can do is come into the properties of my sound. Make sure you've got it selected in the frame. And the effect, I can fade in, fade out, add a custom to it. You can have it start at a certain place or repeat, but your sound options are going to be under the properties and frame, and then right here. For this example, we're going to take an existing path that is on this layer and turn it into a guide. And then we're going to take the butterfly layer and attach it. So let's take the layer, right click, and do guide. That will show us the little pickaxe symbol to symbolize that it's now a guide. And if you need to attach an object to it, all you do is select that layer, and then you drag it, left click, drag it underneath it until you see that symbol. And now the butterfly layer is attached to the trace path layer or the guide layer. So I'm going to rename this guide path. So now we need to attach the butterfly. So I can even have the guide path layer selected, but it will still let me attach the butterfly here. And you'll see that little circle in the middle of the butterfly has to be on the very front of the line there. And then I'm going to go all the way, scrub my head all the way to the end and create a new keyframe. And then move my butterfly to the very end of the path there. And look, it has to snap on right there. So put it in position there, created a keyframe, and then moved it to the end of the path. And now on the butterfly layer, if I right click and create classic tween, it should now follow the guide layer above. And that is how you can attach an object to an existing path, or if a layer has already been made into a guide layer with a little pickaxe, that's how you can attach it by just dragging it on top of it and converting it to a guide layer. So you may see some layers that will look like this, but that's not a guide layer yet because there's nothing attached to it. So this is the symbol when you know something's attached. Our next example is going to be how to add a blur filter to an object. So here is our circle. I'm going to select it, and we're going to go to Properties. Now, there's nothing here that will let us do that. So we need to try Frame, and under Frame, we'll see exactly what we're looking for. Here's filters. If I click the plus sign, I can add drop shadow, blur, glow, all these different effects, but blur is the one I'm looking for. And you'll see this little lock symbol means that if I change one value, the other one will change as well. So if a question said, hey, I need something that's a value of 10 and a quality of high, I'm going to change that 4 to a 10. Notice the change immediately, and then change the quality to low, or to high, excuse me. And again, it's under Properties and Frame. If they tell you to remove a blend option or a filter option and add a blend, to remove a filter, you click the trash can and then go to the blend area and choose one, such as hard light. And you see it applied immediately. Notice that you can only have one blend mode at a time on an object. You can't have more than one, but you can have multiple filters. So that is where you go in your Properties panel under Frame when you have the object selected to add a blend, add a color effect, or to add or delete a filter, such as blur. Let's talk about adding a link to an existing symbol, such as to a website. If I were to click on my rectangle and go to Window and Code Snippets, the one I need is under Action Script and then Actions. First one and then the first one. And then there's the first one right there. Click to go to web page. You'll notice that you have a lot of different objects or code snippets in these folders, so be aware that this is where they are. Double click on this, and it's going to pull up this box with code. The only thing you should have to change is this address right here. So say it wanted me to go to google.com. I don't have a save button, but whenever you exit out of this box, it will automatically save for you. So there's no need to change anything but the address. Close this and then close this, and that should be how you turn a symbol to direct to a web page. You can preview this by hitting Command Enter or Control Enter and then clicking on the object in your animation preview, and it should take you to the website. Okay, let's talk about gradients for a second. I've got my object selected. It's got a, let's just go ahead and change it back to the default of a black fill with a white stroke. And I'm going to go into my color menu and make sure that I have fill color selected, and then I can change it to a linear gradient there. If you have your stroke selected, it's going to put a gradient around the object, so make sure you have the paint bucket selected. If I want to go for a green, I can just click on it and it'll go from one color to the other. If I wanted to add another color, I can just click in here, and I can even be specific. If a question or some kind of problem asks you to put in a specific hexadecimal value, you can add it here. I can even change the tone to be something like that. If you need to get rid of a color on here, you just hold Shift and drag it off like you're chucking it off a cliff, and there it goes. So hold Shift like that. There we go. Kind of hung on for a second. Getting rid of it can be confusing because in Photoshop and Illustrator you can kind of click on these and they go away, but in Animate it just makes more of them. So hold Shift and really just drag it off. So again, you can just add as many colors as you want to in here based on whatever gradient requirements you have for your color palette or for an assignment. But this is how you can add a gradient to a symbol or object with the paint bucket tool. Let's go to masking. You see that we have our Mona Lisa painting on the painting layer, and we have the fire on the fire layer. Let's say that I want to take everything out but the painting and leave the Mona Lisa heaven forbid, she would be burning in a fire. The trick is that you have to make a new layer above the layer you want to mask. Remember that masks work from the top layer down, and that's a very important concept to know because that can help you with other questions as well. Masks work from the top layer down. So here's what I mean. This layer is blank now. There's nothing on it. I'm going to reset my colors, and I'm just going to grab a shape tool, rectangle, and I'm going to draw over the area I want to mask or to show through, which is the painting. Now I'm going to right click on this layer and mask it. And you see that everything on the painting layer that was not in that black square is now gone. The fire is still there because it is not included. You see how the painting layer has this special mask dot in the middle? The fire layer is not included in that because it's not in that grouping. If I were to move fire up by left click and dragging, you could see what would happen. But again, we don't want that. We want that bottom layer to show through. So remember that masking works from the top layer down. Another example of that could be something like this, where you may be asked to show through 4 or 5 different layers with a mask where it says, hey, we want to see, the flame color inside of the word. So if I mask that, the text remains and the rest of the fire is gone, but it's also inside just the letters. It's not inside the fire because we didn't include that. Let's look at another example of how masks can work and be tricky. Let's say that I wanted this sunrise background, this first one, inside the letters, but I also wanted the sun in the letters. Okay, well remember that things work from top to bottom in terms of masking. So if I masked that and put the sun there, it's not exactly what we wanted, but it's kind of close. But what if I dropped this background layer in there as well? Well, that doesn't look like it works either. Here's the tricky thing. You can rearrange masks like this, like in the flame example, but notice that this lock isn't here. So when the lock isn't present, the mask will not apply. So that's how Animate can try to trick you. If I click the lock, now the background layer is there, but we still need the sun in the right place. So let's try moving the sun up, and there it is. Now we have the background we needed in the back there. We have the sun where we needed it to show up, and we have the first background showing up in the letters. So you can rearrange things inside of the layer mask. You just need to make sure that these locks are on, because sometimes they get turned off. Let me walk you through that step again. So if I needed to do the sunrise text to mask that layer, I right click and mask. And to drag this into the mask, if I left click, you'll notice the little bar right there, how it's underneath, how it's kind of indented right there. That's what we want. That's what makes us know that it's going to go into the mask. If I wanted this above that sunrise layer, you see how it goes to the left of the box? That means that the background would just be in the layer above it. If I want it in the mask, it's got to be right there. But then again, that lock is not active, so that makes all the difference in the world by selecting the lock symbol. So if you get a question like this, or if you get a question like this, and you have things that are not showing up, you just need to click on the lock and they will. If you ever put something inside a mask and you don't need it there, you can Command Z it. But don't forget to initialize the lock to get your layer mask to apply. That's the hidden trick that they don't tell you. Let's talk about setting guides in Animate. The one thing we're missing from this scene is our ruler. So if I go to View, Rulers, on a Mac, that will be Command-Alt-Shift-R. Guides are the invisible thing that you can pull out if you've ever used Illustrator or Photoshop previously. All you have to do is click on the ruler itself and then drag the guide down. Let's say I need it at a specific position. So let's say like 100, like right there. I can let go, and there's my invisible blue line. This line doesn't show up on the final product or on prints. It's just for you to use. If I need one to go this way, then I just click on it there. If you need to remove these, you should be able to just go up to Guides and then Clear Guides. And that takes them away. But that's how you can add guides to your scene. Let's talk about moving these symbols into a folder. If you need to move things into a folder on your timeline, you can just click on the folder symbol down here. And I just moved it to the top, and you can, let's just say I wanted the circle in there. Click the circle layer, left click and drag it. See how it does the same thing as the mask? It goes into the folder there. You can give the folder a name if you want to, but as long as it's visible on the scene, like it has frames, it will show up automatically. If it asks you to do this in your library, here are your symbols. So this would be the circle. If I double click that, I can just change it to circle there. That one in your library may go away. That one's my rectangle. Or I can just click on it there. That would be easier. Rectangle. And there's my square. Double click. I can create a folder here by doing the same thing. New folder. And I can just call these shapes I love. And shapes I don't. So if I like a square, just drag it in. I don't really like a rectangle. Drag it in. I like a circle. Drag it in. And then this is how you can organize your things in the Adobe Animate library. Again, doesn't affect anything on the stage. These are just symbols that you have created or imported into your library. So if you have a ton of them in your animation, it's probably good to do some organization here. If you want to get rid of a folder or a symbol, you can just click on the trash can. Organization. Let's talk about how to do rounded corners. Let's say that I needed to match this symbol or this shape to these. If you're creating it from scratch, you have to do something that is a primitive. So rectangle primitive tool. The reason you have to do it is because you want these options or these edit options on the corners. You see these blue dots? Let's go back to my previous example I made. If I go into my properties panel and under object, if I click down here, I can round all of them at once, or I can do them individually. So if I click on one of these, I can see that 21 and 20. So if I change this one to 21 and 20, it will match those. If I need it to be the same size, which it's not quite, then what I can do is hit Command T or Control T if you're on a Windows PC, and you can change your transform values. Notice how these are constrained here, so that if I change this one to be 98, the other one would go to 98 as well. If you don't need it to constrain, you can turn it off to try and make it in whatever value you want. So it looks like to me that that looks okay. Command T on the width. So I'm going to scale this back to maybe 102, and it'll go in both directions. So 102 looks like it needs to go a little bit more. Command T, 104 maybe. Still needs a little bit of tweaking, but it's almost there. It's pretty close. But that's how you can create an object. Remember, it has to be a primitive. And then in your properties, under object, you'll see the options for the rounded corners at the bottom. And then Command T can change your transform values: rotation, skew, width, height.